of the Curriculum Committee. We have a lot of guests with us today. Of course, I have my committee members here. Deborah Brooks is on Zoom, Rachel Gilliar is at the table, and we have guests, Lori Director from Guidance, Dr. Feeney, our liaison, and our principal from the high school, Dr. Bear. We will be discussing college admissions, and we're looking forward to this annual discussion. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Feeney.
Great, thank you very much. On that note, we're excited to provide what has become an annual update of the college admissions, give an overview, talk about some of the current trends and where we are. I'll turn it over to our Director of Guidance, Ms. Laura Director.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for everybody who's here today. Thank you to the Board of Education Curriculum Committee, Dr. Feeney. This is such a, it's a great update each year for all of you. You'll see some things seem to stay the same while some things are always changing. So hope to provide you with a lot of information today, and let's get started. Okay. Sorry. So let's review first the post-secondary data for our most recent graduating class, the class of 2024. As you can see here, most of our graduates attend college upon graduation from Schreiber. Of our college-bound seniors, 90.5% of them attend four-year colleges and 9.5% attend two-year colleges. The remaining 12% of the class of 2024 entered the military or went direct to employment or to trade schools. So our counselors work with all of our students to help develop their post-secondary plans, whether college, career, or employment. A review of the data in the New York State Instructional Data Warehouse tells us that Schreiber students are college and career ready. New York State uses benchmarks set by College Board to define college and career readiness. In 2023-24, New York State considered 94% of our students to be college and career ready in one or both math and evidence-based reading and writing. 86% of our students were considered college and career ready in both subject areas. And although New York State does not use the ACT as a measure of students' college and career readiness, we felt it was important to share some of that data because it is a popular exam for our students. And Schreiber students also exceed the benchmark set by ACT. So the data that you see here now for ACT is actually from this year, and it's from the period of September to December 2024. So let's review a look at our timeline for our college program. The initiatives that you see here are developed by our counseling team and align with our district's mission and vision. The unofficial kickoff for juniors occurs in December with our junior college night for parents, followed by a junior assembly for our students. Junior conferences begin shortly after the new year. They're occurring now and will go ongoing until and throughout April. And any student that does not have an appointment will be contacted by their counselor. If we have to have a junior college meeting in May or June, we will do that so that each student has a meeting to get them set up for the summer. And juniors are also encouraged to stop in to see their counselors with any questions they might have after their meeting and prior to the end of school in June. In mid-August, our counselors offer a common application workshop for those incoming seniors who have questions on how to fill out the common application. In late August, transcripts are shared with students and parents for review. And September and October are very busy months for our seniors and for our counselors with individual college advising, some Common App workshops, and financial aid night for our families and our college mini fairs. So senior year is continued here. And in October and November, we're in high gear. We're getting out those initial transcripts for early action and early decision deadlines. It's also the time for seniors to finalize their applications, even if they are considering regular decision schools. So keeping this in mind, we do host a wide array of colleges in the form of individual visits, mini college fairs, and a Choose Your Future fair for students exploring other career options after high school. So we're going to talk a little bit about the college representative visits, and I'll get through in more data with that in a few slides. But we use Naviance to invite colleges from all across the country and the world in some cases to come to Schreiber. We offer 2 to 3 appointments each day for a period of 6 weeks. And each appointment is hosted by one of those counselors, so they are also learning about the new information on those college campuses, and they turnkey that information to the team. So if in fact we have a school that is either not using that rep visits feature on Naviance, or if there's a conflict and they can't find an appointment that works with their schedule, they give us a call and we always work with them to find a spot for them. Also in December, so we host our Choose Your Future Fair, and each year we've hosted a variety of trade schools, union representatives, other community businesses come in and meet with our students. And some of them, our students who visit, some of them are interested in going straight to career, and some of them are still considering whether they are going to college or career, or some of them are going straight to college and are interested in some of the careers being offered at this fair. By mid-December, we start to see the first round of early admissions decisions released for our seniors. And again, it's a time where our counselors are meeting and having those conversations with our students about their next steps and how they want to proceed with their applications. Students are advised to withdraw if they've been accepted to their early decision schools, and we walk them through the process. And if they find that they are deferred, we talk to them about how we can help them or how they can help themselves in that process. So between January and April, seniors are finalizing their decisions in time for National Decision Day on May 1st. You may remember last year there were lots of different questions about decision days and when those were going to occur. And this year, we're not hearing very much yet, but all signs are pointing towards May 1st being that commitment day. Throughout the entire process, the Schreiber School counselors are available for guidance and support. So this is a little sneak peek on what parents and students can see on Naviance. The picture you see up top is a scattergram, and this is actually for Boston College. This is good information. It's very helpful information. We use this to advise our students, so when they come to us and they want to talk about whether a school is a reach school, a target school, a likely school, we do point to this to help them decide where they fall in that scattergram. But keep in mind there are lots of other factors that go into this data here. This data does not talk about the increase in applications over the last 3, 4, 5 years. This data also does not depict whether an applicant submitted their test scores. So while it's helpful information, it's not everything. But however, we do advise students to plot their GPA and test scores if they have, just to get a sense on how they compare to other students. That scattergram up at the top, the students are comparing themselves to other Schreiber students, but they're not, obviously they're not seeing names, but they're seeing where the plots are. And of course, the goal from our end is to help our students create a balanced list of schools so that they have as many options as possible. Keep in mind that when we talk about a balanced list and building that list, we're not just talking about whether you have the GPA and the test scores, but we're looking really closely at that acceptance rate, because when you're looking at some of the highly selective institutions at below a 5% acceptance rate, that's below 5% worldwide. So we always tell students there just are a subgroup of schools that are always going to be reached because of that selectivity factor. Another important factor to consider for our students is the admissions plans. So students not only have to think about whether they're going to, what schools they're applying to, but they have to decide whether they're applying early or whether they're applying regular decision. By and large, most Schreiber students are applying early to schools, but know that there are 3 different types of early admissions plans, which I'll get into. The big difference between an early action and early decision admissions is we're looking at early decision is going to be a binding agreement. So our students and parents really need to understand what that means, that you are telling the college that you are my top choice. If you accept me, I'm going. If you are applying early action or restrictive early action, those are non-binding agreements. Now, restrictive early action is something that's only used at some of the very highly selective Ivy League institutions. It's not something you'll see everywhere, but you can only apply to one early school. Early action, you can apply as many early schools as you want, and you'll have the flexibility of being able to balance different financial aid plans in making your decision. So that's the real big difference between early action and early decision. So students and parents need to be informed. Another important piece to note with early decision, students must sign something explaining they understand the terms. Parents must sign something understanding the terms, and we as counselors also need to sign something letting the schools know that we've advised students and parents of the binding nature of early admissions. Okay, and rolling admissions is exactly that. You can apply on a particular date and get an answer within 6 to 8 weeks. Typically, the earlier you apply, the better. That doesn't mean that you have to apply on August 1st, but rolling admissions is always beneficial when you submit before November 1st. This way, the admissions, the program, some of the selective programs are not filled up yet. Okay, and regular admissions is something that our students' typical deadline dates are around January 1st, with a few exceptions a little bit later than that. Regular decision, students typically find out sometime in March, by the end of March, when they will get in. So let's transition from the process of applying to current trends in admissions. So it's interesting to me as I prepare this, noting what was trending last year and how some things have changed and some things have stayed the same. So some of the things that have changed, we have a new presidential administration, and that is leading to some conversations at the college level, just based on the changes that have been signaled to coming to federally funded programs, and that includes programs at the universities. So college presidents are paying close attention to what that might mean at their institutions. Another big announcement occurred in January when the National Student Clearinghouse, which is the organization that keeps all the data on college admissions and our students, let us know that in fact, they made a correction from their announcement back in September when they said that freshman enrollment was down, but they came out with a correction in January and said, no, actually it's up. So initially what was reported was that overall admissions was down. I could tell you that was not the case here at Schreiber, but that was a big, it caused people to reconsider how accurate the data that they received was. This hasn't necessarily changed. I think we've been seeing this more and more over the last few years. However, colleges are using deferrals more and more. Some of it is because they're still getting more and more applicants. Depending on the school, they're still receiving record numbers of applications. So it's more common for students to be deferred in the early round. They want to take a second look in the regular round. So we're seeing that as being used more and more as a tool. Another recent report this week stated that fewer colleges are honoring legacy admissions. So for some families, that's important to note. Our governor this past summer had announced a new FAFSA initiative mandating school districts to report on how many families are completing the FAFSA. So that is data that we are now collecting for the first time from graduating seniors. We are not, to my knowledge, we are simply reporting just numbers. We're not reporting anything more than that, but students who are filing the FAFSA, it is something that's being being filed publicly with the state. So, but we haven't seen what the actual reporting will look like yet. Just yesterday, Carnegie classifications were released for the first time since changes, since 2005. So I've already seen some colleges that are announcing how they're excited to be an R1 or, but it is providing some additional clarity on what is a research institution and what that definition means. So not much has changed with test optional admissions from last year to this year. In fact, I think the number is now 83% of colleges and universities are test optional. So more and more schools are remaining test optional, except what we see in the headlines are when those substantially selective institutions are returning to tests. The interesting thing to note with those schools, and Brown is a good example, they received fewer applications this year. However, their percentage was, they accepted a larger percent from the early decision round, but keep in mind that early decision, you are getting those applicants who typically have the stats for those schools. But they found that the return to using the exams is a better predictor for this set of institutions. At Schreiber, we're going to be hosting digital ACT, the ACT in April will be digital for the first time, and most of our AP exams will also be digital in May. Our PSATs and ACTs have been digital since last fall, and those have been moving along very nicely. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the topic of standardized tests. We've already discussed that most colleges and universities are not relying on standardized tests. The Ivies are returning. They're making decisions to return to using the testing. They believe that there is value, as I said, as a predictor of college success. So I'll let you just take a look. I think I said much of this, but the earliest reports are showing that for the Ivies, they've received fewer applicants. However, because they are finding meaning in the test, they are renewing their, restating their commitment to requiring tests. So at Schreiber, how does this translate for us and our counselors? This, it's always going to be a popular question for us and our students. Our kids take the tests, whether they're taking SAT or ACT. I think the data shows that our kids seem to take the ACT more frequently than the SAT, but we still have a large population of students that take either one. Counselors are asked all the time. We go back to the most recent admissions data that we have for those schools. Usually it's from the prior year, and we look at what was their mid 50% of students in the testing range that submitted. So then we can say to them, okay, if your scores fall within this middle 50%, we feel confident that you can submit your scores. And that is what we are typically using. When we ask our college representatives when they come in, or when we see them at conferences, this is what they advise us to do. Okay, I'm going to bring it back to Schreiber. You may remember this slide. I added something a little bit new at the bottom because I was kind of wowed by the data. So we're still trending up with number of applications submitted, and this is as of February 13th. And you can see that our class of 2025, our average number of applications per student is up to 15.5. And you can see how that's increased from 5 years ago. So far for the class of 2025, 87% of students have already applied to college. 3% of these applications were early decision, and the outcomes of either they've been accepted, they've been deferred, or they've been denied. And 47% of those applications were early action, and similar outcomes. But the bottom with the number of applications trending, I thought was noteworthy. Last year, we had our highest number of applications from one student was 37. As you can see at the top, we have a high of 52. So that's a big, big swing. I'd like you all to know that when we build our list with our kids, we are not advising them to apply to, we tell kids you can have a really balanced list with 10 to 12 schools. But some students wish to apply, cast a wide net. But what was really eye-opening for me was, so last year we had 4 or 5 students who applied, who had over 30 applications. This year the number is 13. So we had a total of 5 students with over 40 applications. That number is significant. So when the councils and I talk about this, we have the same conversations. This is something that they're never advising students to apply to that many schools for whatever the reasons are. It's ultimately a family decision, but I just thought this was an interesting number to show all of you. So do keep in mind that early admissions, while it makes up the largest percentage, it does include the number of students that are applying regular decision. That 13% of students that have not applied to college, we know who those students are. The students have already discussed their plans with their counselors. Some of them may be applying to 2-year schools and haven't submitted the applications yet. It's not too late for that. Some of the students are going directly to career or trade schools. So we do know what the status is of the other remaining 13%. So the complete data will not be available until after graduation, but for now, this is the picture of our applications. So I also wanted to include some current trends in enrollment this year, because looking at that data, I think you'll find it very interesting. I hope you can see this in front of you. This is, we like to look at in the high school guidance department, we're always interested to know where are our students going? What's the top 5 with the highest enrollment? So for the most recent year that it is reported was for the class of 2023. Typically we see 5, but you can see here that private and public schools, there were a couple of ties, so we don't have, we're actually seeing more. So it may not be much of a surprise that the top 5 public colleges, up at the top you have SUNY Binghamton and Penn State, very popular with our students, rounding out with Stony Brook, Buffalo, Indiana, and Nassau Community College receives the most number of students. Top 5 private colleges, if you can't see that, we have Tulane, St. John's, Northeastern, Marist, Hofstra and GW receive the same number of students. LIU Post and Syracuse received the highest number of Schreiber graduates, which is giving Dr. Bear a big smile. May not be much of a surprise to see that our top 5 college states include New York is at the top. Interesting that South Carolina and Indiana are 4 and 5. I'm gonna move over to 2022 so you can see how that changes. So look at where we've got Delaware in there now, and Binghamton is now number 2 instead of number 5. And for private schools, we have the inclusion of New York Institute of Technology, Cornell, Bucknell, Hofstra's still there, Syracuse is still number 1, and Adelphi is there. And in 2022, top 5 college states, we don't see South Carolina, but we do see Delaware. What I can suspect might have something to do with that was I just think USC and Clemson had decided that they were going to have an early admissions blitz and started accepting applications where students just needed to basically submit their grades and self-report if they wanted to, their test scores, and an October 15th deadline, and boom, we saw a surge in applications to Clemson and University of South Carolina. And sometimes it's just something like that that can change the data. And now let's take a look at our class of 2021. What I found interesting here, so you see For our public schools, Delaware is now off that list, even though it still remains a very popular school for our students. Indiana is still there, Stony Brook, Penn State, Buffalo, and Nassau Community. Our top 5 privates, Northeastern comes in as number 1 at the same rate as Miami, then Syracuse, Tulane, and Hofstra. And our top 5 college states, New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. Now, if you could see the bottom 2, Florida and Louisiana, what I suspect had something to do with that. In 2021, if you remember, we were still kind of in a COVID unknown. We were figuring things out. I think students attended college that year. Up here in the Northeast, it was questionable whether they were going to be in person, whether they were going to be virtual. But down in the South, there was a lot more flexibility, and our students were flocking to schools down south. So I think that that's reflected here in this data. Okay, so let's now take a look at our college acceptances for the class of 2024. So let's take a peek at our Ivies. And here's where we show our comparison to another comparable North Shore district. I could say that most of our data remained fairly flat this year with the acceptances. Keep in mind that the number of applications you see here is also, that includes our regular decision applications as well. Okay, I'll let you take a look at this. Now, some of the institutions did receive a record number of applications again this year, so Dartmouth, University of Pennsylvania, and Yale. So that's something to make note of. Keep in mind that when schools report that they're reporting these record number of applications, they're also keeping the same number of beds. So the selectivity is even higher. And for some, when you think about, so let's look at the top one, Brown, we had 3 students accepted last year and 0 students accepted at the neighboring district. We're comparing numbers. We don't know exactly what those applicants' qualifications were, so keep that in mind as we're looking at this. And let's look at some of the Tier 1 schools. Okay, so the schools that make up the Tier 1 list include flagship public universities to elite private institutions. And similar to the Ivies, the number of applications were near record highs from the year before. I think on this list it was MIT was the only one that reported a record. And the next slide. Which is a continuation. Some of the schools did not report the number of applications for the incoming class of 2028 just yet. So anywhere you see 3 asterisks, that data was for the class of 2027. Okay, so now that we've seen the data, let's compare and review. So, Schreiber's acceptance rate was better at 3 of the 8 schools. Was the same at 2 of the 8 schools. And we were worse at 3 of the 8 schools for the Ivies. And our Tier 1 schools, our acceptance rate was better at 6 of the 20 schools. Worse at 12 of the 20, and the same at 2 of the 20. Compared to last year, for Tier 1, our acceptance rate was better at 8 of the 20. Okay, so it's not just about getting into the schools for our kids, as we know. There's so much more to the story than just getting accepted. While our students can let out a sigh of relief, having submitted their applications, other factors must be considered prior to matriculation. Students and families have much to consider before committing to a college. We haven't, so far, the news seems to indicate that students will get their financial aid packages in a more timely manner than last year, but we're not 100% certain. But students have to take into consideration what is going to be the best fit for them, not just personally and socially, but for some families financially. They need to see what is the best fit. So once financial aid awards start to arrive, families are making those decisions, and they have to have the resources available to make those informed decisions. And that's where the relationships come in with their school counselors at Schreiber. So counselors are having those conversations with families and helping them weigh out the factors of the financial aid offerings. We can decipher what exactly are the differences between the grants and the loans. What is the difference between the student loans and a Parent Plus loan? And they play a pivotal role in the process for our families. So while ultimately, yes, it's a family decision, our counselors are having those conversations. The other reason that we want to have those conversations early on is especially for our students who are students who are our English language learners or our first-generation students or our special education students, so that they can make informed decisions, so that they do not become, one of the what the U.S. Department of Education calls the 10 to 20% of disadvantaged students who experience summer melt. So we do all that we can to prevent our students from having those difficulties, to get them to attend school in August. Okay, now let's take a peek at our class of 2025 acceptances, and this is an early preview. But I think you'll see there were so many schools that they've been admitted to that it took 2 slides. So I'll let you take a look at this. And I'll move to the next one. So I'm extremely proud to let everybody know that we had, again this year, we had 2 QuestBridge winners. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with QuestBridge, it is an extremely selective program for students who are lower socioeconomic. Students who are would be unable to attend some of these institutions, and they partner with certain colleges, some very highly selective institutions, to offer acceptance for these students. Once they're on these college campuses, they are offered every opportunity to become acclimated to the college campus. They are met with the resources that they need and the unique resources that they need to be successful. This could include some funds, maybe to get them back and forth to home when during breaks, funds for books, funds for activities. The 2 schools that we have on the list for our students that were accepted, the University of Notre Dame and the University of Chicago. Let's also take a look at a snapshot of how our students are doing so far at the Ivies. So keep in mind again that the column with the number of applications includes everybody who has applied early and regular. And students will get their final decisions by the end of March. So this year, you can see that we have included our deferred to regular decision. The asterisk for Harvard basically indicates that all 15 of those applications were submitted regular decision. We did not have any early applicants to Harvard this year. And keep in mind also that that includes, like I said, a mix of early and regular decision applications. So just to give you a sense of what's happening when students learn that they are deferred, oftentimes kids need to make a quick pivot to another school. And usually they find out at a time that it's right before an early decision 2 deadline. So lots of our students make that quick decision along with their families and their counselors to talk about, okay, because once you move out of that early decision round, you're in the regular decision round, you do not have to go to that school. So that binding agreement is now broken. Okay, let's take a look at our initiatives for this year. So as always, it's very important that we ensure that we have initiatives and programs for every one of our students. We know that many of our kids are have family members who have attended college, so they have the resources available at home. But in ensuring that we increase student engagement for our English language learners and our first-generation students has been an important aspect of the work that we do. So for the second year, we are taking students on a sponsored trip by the Ed Foundation to college campuses. We have a group of students attending the College of Staten Island and Wagner College in April. We have 30 students attending the trip, and it's 30 because that is what the college has capped us at. So we're primarily focusing on bringing our sophomores and juniors. If there are seniors that still need to go, we will take seniors. And again, and this is to give our kids an idea of what a college campus is like, what our essential offices to see. They'll get a sense of programs. They will have lunch on the college campus. And in addition, we also are increasing opportunities for our students with disabilities to earn a Regents diploma. And this is done obviously through our BOCES partnerships, where kids can earn a CTE credential. And that credential could potentially be a pathway to a Regents diploma with our community partnerships. And this is available to some of our students who are obtaining a CDOS credential, which is a Career Development Occupational Studies credential. And again, this is something that can be used as a pathway to graduation for students. In addition to that pathway, these kids get the confidence that they need to go out and be employable immediately upon graduation, if that is the career path that they are choosing. So let's talk about our college visits to Schreiber. I mentioned it a few moments ago. So our individual college rep visits, last year we had 91, this year we had 89. Although that reflects a 2.2% decrease, I would say that the number of appointment slots was the same. However, this could reflect maybe 2 visits being canceled. Sometimes we have some resourceful representatives who want to come twice. We try to limit that because we want to give an opportunity to everybody for visits. So while it was a small decrease, I consider that to be mostly flat. Our mini college fairs continue with a robust presence in our lobby for 4 Wednesdays in September and October, typically between 20 and 24 schools in attendance. And we like to diversify that list to include schools that maybe our students are not as familiar with, so that they can broaden their horizons a little bit. And as you can see, by some of the college data, we do get lots of applications to the same number of schools. So we want our students to have a broad understanding of the options out there. This year, for the first time, we are in collaboration with some of the North Shore districts, including Roslyn, Wheatley, North Shore, Herricks, and more, for a spring college consortium. This will be at Roslyn High School on April 2nd. More information will be shared about that. This has been something in the works now for almost a year. Roslyn was happy to host it for our students. The flyer that went out to the colleges, it did say Roslyn and North Shore Friends, but we had to be cautious to help them understand it wasn't just the North Shore School District. However, this has been widely and highly received by the representatives because they're often looking for ways to avoid conflicts with other schools. So by us doing this on the day after the Hofstra Fair, we have capitalized on an opportunity to have the most representatives here as possible. Another initiative this year was offering some improvements and enhancements to our school profile. So for those of you who are not familiar with what our school profile, what the purpose of it is, every college receives a copy of this profile with every application that leaves our office. Colleges look at this to understand it's kind of like our roadmap for Schreiber because every high school does things differently. They have different weighting scales, different grading policies. Our colleges are reviewing our students' applications in the context of other Schreiber students. However, this lets them know what are our curriculum offerings, what makes us special, are there any changes? So every year when this goes out, one of the things that I have done is speak to our representatives when I go to NACAC and let them know, hey, this is our profile this year. First, do you need any explanation? Do you know what we're about? And they all say, yes, we know Schreiber, we're familiar. Okay, so here's what's different this year. Please pay attention. And some of the things we were able to update was our curriculum offerings. We had gotten some expanded definitions on that, and specifically on our research programs and our senior experience program, just to give colleges an understanding of how important senior experience is for our students and for our community. We also included more details on our dual enrollment courses and the dual enrollment course key that appears on our transcripts. And this is to give you a sense of where our counselors have visited and will be visiting this year. So each year, there is a portion of the budget allocated to trips so that the counselors can visit these campuses, bring the information back. There's no better way than to discuss with a student, or sometimes we can just go visit a school and say, you know, oh, this school would be great for, and we know which students, and we come back and we let them know, and it's really a great talking point for our students. So how do we expand college possibilities each year for our students? Well, we attend various webinars and meetings offered by our college partners. NACAC is it's the largest, brings together all of the college representatives from across the world. This year it was in LA. I had the opportunity to go meet with lots of our university partners, visit college campuses, attend meetings and learn trends in the field. And this also just gives you an idea of some of the other meetings. Each year, SUNY offers an in-depth opt-in form that lets us know what are some of the new initiatives happening on the 64 campuses of SUNY. And professional development that we do ongoing each year, again, talking about trends in college admissions, where we are frequently having article discussions at our meetings, and even, you know, if we come in on a Monday morning and something was interesting in the Chronicle for Higher Education, we're sharing it out with each of us. Attendance at local conferences and national conferences, the SUNY meetings that I just talked about. Financial aid continues to be an important topic for our counselors, and SUNY and the Higher Education Services Corporation of New York State offered training this year for our counselors. We are also in discussions about the New York State Blue Ribbon measures that will be implemented in a few years, or that are in talks at the state level, just to give us an idea of what is expected and how we can continue to inform our college program. So these were our initiatives from last year and how they are updated. We are constantly assessing our college and career counseling delivery and making changes based upon what our current reality looks like. So this year, our counselors worked together on making updates to our school counseling plan, where we reviewed our college and career readiness delivery with a cultural lens to ensure that all students have equitable access to our programs. 10 of our school counselors across the district have been trained in restorative practices. We also attendance at a comp camp, and that is for our comprehensive developmental school counseling program, where we review what our regulations that were put in place in 2019-20, that infamous school year, and revisiting our school counseling regulations to ensure that we are meeting those regulations. And with communication this year, that has been so much more simplified and enhanced with Parent Square, and through the use of Google Classrooms, where our counselors are able to speak to, especially our juniors and seniors, to share out information. So our takeaways are not much different than they have been, especially from last year to this year. The most important piece is for informing parents on what those realities are with college admissions. So educating students and parents on the process. It's not always what we want to hear, but the reality is the reality. Admissions decisions are not always about the individual student, and I think that's the hardest takeaway for parents, and understandably so. It's really just about how the institution chooses to shape each class. Colleges are going to continue to lack transparency on what it is that they're looking for. Always a great amount of uncertainty. I see that continuing for the near future. And it is far more likely that students will not get accepted to these highly selective institutions. It's just a fact. Students, we encourage them to apply. They should be applying, but they also should know what it can be a bumpy terrain, and if they are okay with managing that socially and emotionally, then we support what they wish to do, and we encourage them to balance out that list with other selective but maybe not so selective schools. So having that resilience to handle rejection, that goes along with what I just said, and with getting deferred, sometimes it's that limbo that is even harder for some of our students. But as a district, we can continue to expand college and career awareness at earlier grades. That is my presentation for all of you. Thank you.
A lot to take in.
Yes.
I look forward to discussions and questions, and I will turn it over to either Rachel or Deb to start.
Deb, are you there? You wanna go first? You want me to go first?
Okay, happy to go first.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm actually going to start with the last slide first. How does the district expand awareness at earlier grades?
So some of the things that we have been doing, offering our parent universities, offering our freshman family night, where we talk about things to help our students get acclimated, and talking about tips and tricks to how to be a successful student at Schreiber, and that all translates to post-secondary awareness. You know, the last few years since I've been here, we have really been focusing on helping students with that transition, because typically those meetings occur in September or October. So we feel that it's very important to not necessarily provide students with a roadmap to college admissions at that time, but what are some things that we can do? So in addition to that freshman family night, and our counselors having those freshman meetings with their, they have those freshman group meetings where they're performing with the students and walking them through how to do a career interest inventory or personality interest inventory, so that the students can get an idea of what type of learner they are. And that's really helpful for the students, and it kind of springboards that relationship with the counselor and the freshmen so that they can use that data as they develop that relationship over the next 4 years. Because, interest inventories don't tend to change. A student might change their mind on a career focus. We tell the students it's okay not to have a narrow pinpoint on what career they want. However, if their career interest inventory comes out where they're more of an extrovert, maybe working in a small lab might not be the career that will make them the most happy, or if they insist that it will, then we have conversations about what that might look like. So introducing those types of initiatives for students.
Can I it lists different ways, so you're talking about ways that we currently do it. What are you looking to add, or what do you think we're lacking?
What do I think we're lacking? I think there's always room for improvement. I think there are ways to improve even at the, bridging at the middle school level. I think that some of the work that has happened, again, with the College Pioneers, we have a group of students who are, get a sense of what tools they need to build their college and career skills. Expanding that, one of the things that I had a conversation with our lead middle school counselor this week, I had gotten an interest survey from BOCES on doing a middle school visit to Barry Tech, or even if it's just for counselors. I think that's a great way to expand college and career awareness. If we could bring 8th graders to visit. Now, keep in mind, I say these things, and obviously, instructional time is at a premium, but, those are some things that we can do to bridge a little bit earlier. We are doing career days at the elementary level and bringing those speakers in to help students identify what their roles could be in the community. But I see maybe more of a participation perhaps at maybe with some middle schoolers.
Sorry, Deb, go ahead.
It's okay. So now I'm going to go back to the beginning of the presentation and go forward with my questions. Thank you, by the way, because I know this is a lot of data crunching and analysis, so I appreciate the work that has gone into this. On the 4-year and the 2-year colleges, you gave us percentages. Do we, or are we required to break down those percentages by subgroups? So for example, do we know if any ELL students are going to a 4-year college, or any students within the subgroups? Are we required to do that, or if we're not required, do we think it would be instructive to do that?
So actually, that data is available on the New York State, on the New York State portal. Yes, so we do have that.
Okay. Do we use that data at all to inform any internal decisions?
Oh, yes, we do, because, so some of the things that we have started to do since I've gotten here was doing regular push-ins to our English language learners into the classes, and having, and into some of our special education classes, to have more direct instruction on the application process, on the what juniors should be doing right now. Now, keeping in mind, we have conversations with the teachers frequently, where our students are in the process, giving them a sense of what it is they should be thinking about doing right now, what it is, really having more tailored conversations with those students. And that's something that we have integrated into our program.
And also the college trips that you did with the Ed Foundation, that also came as a result of helping make college seem more possible to students who might not have parents who have gone to college and might need a little bit more encouragement. So that's where you and Kristen did those trips.
Which segues into my next question. So we have a large population of students who are either ELL or first generation, or both. And I know you said in your presentation the process was important, and having the parents be well informed was important. is there outreach to those parents before the first outreach in junior year? And I ask because I went to school in this country, my parents went to school in this country, I have grandparents who went to school in this country, and I still found the process of getting my daughter through the application process to be overwhelming and confusing because much has changed since these 3 generations went to school. And I can't imagine it for a parent who has never been to college, who's new in this country, who doesn't speak the language, or any of those 3 permutations put together and more. So, is there any outreach to that group of parents before the normal outreach to the junior class?
Yes, so our Schreiber social worker, one of our Schreiber social workers offers a fall series for, in Spanish, for our Spanish-speaking families to navigate that process. It's one of the meetings, and they have a financial aid meeting, and they have other meetings based on topics relating to social emotional skills. They also touch upon executive functioning skills, how to support their students in the process. The college admissions process is also a part of that, those meetings. So she hosts a series of meetings. Our Weber social worker also has meetings with families. It looks a little bit different because those are younger students, but she also keeps in close contact with her group of college pioneers even as they transition to Schreiber. And then she's also having conversations with their counselors at Schreiber to ensure that they have those opportunities. So yes, I think I also our director of ENL, Ms. Zarate, she also hosts meetings for families throughout the year. So they do have access to the information before that junior college meeting.
Deb, can I piggyback on that for a second?
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I understand that we have a guidance counselor who has recently engaged as more of a bridge for our students with disabilities. Am I correct on that?
So one of the things that I had done in my first year here through conversations with Dr. Allen was we felt that it would be more beneficial for our students to have one counselor dedicated towards our self-contained special education students and our life skills students.
So, okay, so I'm correct.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's been successful as far as we understand.
Yes,
Do we have something like that? Do we have a counselor that specializes in engaging with our students from the English language learner population?
we do. We have 2 counselors who work with our English language learners. They have a caseload of students who are English language learners, and then they have a case of students who are not English language learners. But there are enough of those students to split between the 2 of them, and they regularly workshop in with those classes and break down, and going from before that junior meeting, they'll have meetings with them in 9th and 10th grade, and then in junior year, they start talking more about the college process or career process. And even now in senior year, they're going to be going in and talking to those students about our community scholarship application and ensuring that that's accessible to those students as well.
Sorry again, Deb, I keep.
The one piece that I've always wished we don't have access to, it's not a reportable number, we do not have access to who is a first-generation college student. That is self-report only. So a student can self-report that to the counselor, but if they don't, we don't know that they are first gen. But that is something that in many ways, our early knowledge is key for those students because there are special initiatives that the colleges offer for students, maybe fly-in opportunities to bring them into a campus at some of the selective schools. So we do work to identify those students, but it is self-report.
Do the counselors ask?
They do ask, again, that goes back to the relationships, but they will ask, are you the first in the family to attend college? And then, that's usually part of the junior meeting, unless they know sooner.
Do we have, so it sounds like almost like a reinventing of the wheel, and I know there is, what is that, when we go from building to building, and there's conversation.
Articulate.
Right, the articulation that happens at the various transitions. So do we save and share all of, like, why would we be asking that question starting in 11th grade?
That's a good question. I can't say that, if it's information that, let's say, a Weber counselor might have, and we do have articulation meetings, so if there's information to be shared about that, that would be shared. I'm just thinking about some of the articulations meetings that I sat in typically, so there are meetings that take place academically, we went over the students and their academic performance. Are they at risk academically? We also ask about their social emotional behavior, and those meetings take place typically between the social workers and the counselors. So
So the College Pioneers, if I could interrupt, the
Sure.
College Pioneers starts at Weber?
Yes,
And how do we identify those students? Or would they not be considered first gen, or how do we identify
they
that
typically
population?
are considered first gen. Monica Chacon, who is the social worker who runs that, she has, I'm not exactly sure what her method is to identify those students, but she's probably working with our English language learners and those who would be college bound based on their proficiency in the English language, or maybe they were English language learners in elementary school, so that information does translate up. So it could be an easy identifier if we have a former English language learner or even a current one. But some of the other students that may never have been English language learners, we may not know unless we directly ask them.
Sorry, Deb, this is gonna be hard to cover all of this with just one person at a time.
No, I'm going to stop. I have more questions, but I'm going to stop, and if we have more time, I'll ask my other questions.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
I have a lot of little questions, but I'm gonna start with my big question, because I know we're running out of time. I think the most important thing to the board, and probably to the other people who are sitting here, as we're listening to all this, is, the landscape is what the landscape is, the process is what the process is. There's a lot of stuff we can't control, and there are a lot of variables. But I think the most important thing to me is, are we doing the absolute best we could be doing for our kids? And I would say, from my perspective, my definition of the best would be that we're maximizing what each student is achieving on the way out. And I want to be very clear, we're advising kids towards the best schools for them, right? I think there's an element of this that is like an academic high achiever issue, and we are making sure we're doing what we need to do to give them the best chance of getting in. And then obviously they have to do what they want to do, but I think to me maximizing is also, are we identifying students who may not think they can afford college and making sure they understand that there's financial aid and what's available and that it is a possibility for them. And identifying students who can do college, but either because they have their own challenges or their backgrounds or whatever, they may not realize or believe in themselves enough or understand what the path looks like. And so we're giving them what they need to get there. There's a lot of variables here. So one, how do we even evaluate and assess whether we are actually doing that, right? Because kids got into a lot of great schools, and we have the majority on a path to somewhere, but how do we know that we have done our best to get them on the best path for them? How do you even begin to measure that and assess it? And is that something that can even come internally from the people who are also doing the work on the ground?
So that actually leads to my question, which was, is there a way of understanding retention data? Right, these students get in, but are they, if they're in the right place, they stay. If they're not, they have to move on. So I guess that's like do we have that, is kind of what that
So
looks like.
New York State is starting to report that data. They've linked up with the National Student Clearinghouse, so some of that becomes available. Obviously, it's not going to be as recent as we would like it to be, but we can start to see and get a sense of where our kids, because obviously retention is going to be the biggest measure to drive our program. I think that, in the here and now, it comes down to the relationships we're having with our students. Add in the layer this year for some of our newcomers who have grave concerns over the social political landscape and having some very sensitive conversations with some families who are now thinking about other things that maybe they hadn't thought had needed to think about before, what their future is here, and is it safe to fill out a form? Is it safe for a student to fill out a form if the student was born here? So there are many sensitive conversations taking place regarding the question about the financial aid. Yes, sometimes that means, and these are tough conversations for kids. Oftentimes what we see, and as a parent, I get it, we want what's best for our students, and sometimes we make decisions based on what we think we can, we think our financials are in one place, and then they get there and the package doesn't look like the way we thought it would, and having those delicate conversations that are ultimately up to the families, but navigating the path, and that could include, if you really want to go to this super expensive private school, defer for a year and stay low. But it may not be what they want to do, but giving them those options and helping explain what they can do.
If I could just
Sure.
interject,
Sure.
just as Ms. Director shared earlier, the reports from the Nassau Data Warehouse about where our kids are applying. There are reports on retention and how successful after X number of years, 4 years, what the graduation rate is. It's not a, there are some schools that don't report that, like I think Duke is notorious for not reporting it, but by and large, you're hitting most of the colleges and universities that our kids apply to. So we do have access to that information. And when you look at that, just one of the side pieces, as someone who's studied that, for two-year colleges, which, a lot of people think that's a great option for kids, it may actually not be. Nationally, the rate of getting some sort of certificate or degree at a two-year college is very low. And even after 6 years, I think it's only about 30% of the kids who go to a two-year school actually wind up with something.
Is that our Schreiber data or that's
nationally.
national?
Our Schreiber data are better than that, but that's not necessarily the best path. Sometimes the path is a four-year school where you can get some financial support, and that's out there, especially for some first-generation students who have done well. So you can glean a lot of information from looking at some of those, and we can get a sense of where are our kids successful. And I know that in one of my previous districts, we quickly learned that we needed to steer kids away from one of the well-known two-year colleges and direct them to another one where we found there were greater supports and kids were more successful in it.
So you don't have that off the top of your head,
Not off the
obviously.
top of my head, no, but it's
Will
accessible.
you please share that with the board? Because I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're
If you ask nicely,
driving at.
sure. It's a joke, of course, of course.
It's only some other board members who do.
I think that would be really, really helpful, because that gives us, and I hope that our counselors are obviously using that information so that we do drive our students to the right choices.
I will say, even anecdotally, I mean, they know, they'll advise students, they'll advise families, they know, they make the best, they give the best suggestions that they can. At the end of the day, it's a family decision where the student ultimately decides to enroll. We do, and sometimes, sometimes it works out where they go to where, that was the best fit for them, and sometimes, we get the call a few months later, hey, could you send my transcript to such and such? And that, and sometimes people's financial status changes and they have to make other decisions. But yes, I mean, it's, we do use that, and similar to what Dr. Feeney just said, we too have a particular two-year school that we like for their supports better than another. So, and this is all based on data and what our students need.
I interrupted again, go ahead.
So I'm not sure if that was a complete answer to my question, but so really what I was going for is like, how do we assess whether we're really doing our best to serve everybody?
Right,
And do we do that assessment?
okay.
And do we think we are?
So yes, at the end of the year, I'm reviewing with the counselors, so what was our calendar like? What did we do? How did we do? At the end of the day, we look at every graduate, every student, we have to report what their plan is. So that is an important factor for New York State reporting. The counselors know, since I've been there, that unknown is not an acceptable answer for me. It happens, unfortunately, sometimes, but we want to know every student has to have a plan. Back when I was doing this work as in their shoes, you know, graduating to mom's couch was not a plan. So we find that we've also initiated at the end of the year those senior exit meetings where they have to meet with each one of their students as a final check-in. Okay, is there anything that I can finally do to support you? Where the way we collect the data is much different. Students are often very shy with reporting for Naviance. We tell them all the time, please update it. It's for, you know, pay it forward for your future alums, but they're often shy. So we started to do those senior exit meetings to collect all that information about accepting and rejecting. That's just one piece of the assessment. So really knowing where our kids are going, and that number of unknowns has decreased significantly. So that was an important thing to assess. Assessing later on, so really those reports from the data warehouse would help inform. I think that more knowing how do we assess if our program is successful, well, we're getting into more into our English language learners classrooms, having that dedicated special education counselor who is working directly with our Mile students. And you know, some of our Mile kids are going to four-year college, some of our Mile kids are going to two-year, and some of them are going to a trade school. So they have a diverse array of opportunities. And so I think by having more visibility with all of our groups, we have done a better job at reaching all of those students. Doesn't mean that there isn't more to be done. There's always more to be done that can be done, and I think that as the landscape changes, it will continue to inform how we do what we do. Sometimes it's you know, looking at the differences between a 2 and a 4 year, we can probably look at that if we compared our students going to a New York State school versus an out-of-state public school. We might surmise that has a financial implication to those decisions. It may not necessarily be the case, but it might be. Again, with some of the private schools, did they get an excellent package? Did they, or you know, some more, maybe were they able to afford the four-year tuition as early decision candidate? So we can parse out some of that data from analyzing it, but it's important to use that, absolutely. I don't know if that answered better.
Well, I may be asking a question that's very, very difficult to answer, and I realize it's kind of a privileged question, right? We're starting from the starting point where we have already built our program to make sure that we're making sure that every kid has a plan, right? Which is not where a lot of places are starting, and I think that's really important. I think what I'm trying to get at is, are we making sure that it is the best plan or the right plan? And I'm asking that question with the awareness that I think that there are many, many students, maybe most of them, who need an adult who believes in them to say, why is this your plan? And have you thought about this plan that might be slightly more, because I think you're capable of that too. And let's talk about that.
So I think to answer that, I mean, it's a very good question because they do need to have a relevant and meaningful plan. And that goes back to when they're selecting their courses. I'm gonna jump back to an experience I had here a few years ago when we were first onboarding BOCES, and a student in front of me who wanted to do a particular program there. And, you know, I wanted to support that for that student, but looking at the academic status of this particular student, I didn't feel that this was the best path for that student. So that goes back to those relationships and the counselors. So I can, you know, speak to my experience, and I don't have a caseload of kids, but because I was that involved in that process in that first year, and, you know, I had to have that honest and tough conversation to say, it's not that I don't support this as an interest of yours, but if you're sitting here and saying to me that in senior year, or your student had already said to me he was interested in a certain top-tier institution. So I had to say that this, while I think this is wonderful, I think that the best way to get you to that institution is to stay at Schreiber and take AP classes, and this is going to veer you from that path. So yes, those conversations are definitely happening with our counselors and students. Sometimes it does start with academic course selection, right, to get you to that point, so that if you're a high-achieving student and you want to move forward and be considered as a top-tier student leaving Schreiber. I'm also thinking of, we have one student who's absolutely lovely and sort of a little bit of a later bloomer, who is now gonna go into his senior year and wanting to take AP class. Like that to me is the most fabulous story, because here you have a student, a child who believes in himself and believes, I know I can do this, and maybe I just needed some time to get there. So the counselors are having those conversations with those students, and we always push them to do, you know, we want them to achieve at a proximal level to their development, and knowing that they will continue to develop. One of the most challenging things as a counselor in this field, you know, we're dealing with 17, 18-year-old minds that aren't necessarily fully developed, and sometimes what they think they want at 17 and 18 looks so much different than when they're 20 and a junior in college, or so we do the best with them in the right now, and that definitely starts with picking a course selection, and then moving into their college selection. We don't want to see a student short sell themselves, academically speaking. There is a strategy that some do use when it comes to selectivity, because that's the way it goes, and maybe playing that scholarship game, but we always encourage students to push themselves. And then, so I hope that helped a little bit.
Oh, yeah, a little.
Okay.
I have a bunch of smaller questions, but I'm not gonna do them all because I know we're short on time. Two quick ones from the first couple pages. We have this figure, the 12% that entered the military, employment, or trade schools. Do we have the breakdown of which is which for those?
Doesn't give me the actual breakdown of what that looks like.
It is, where's the data coming from?
I could, that's also coming from the data warehouse. I could tell you that the percentage for the military is gonna be the smallest of those. Typically, we have 2, 3, 4 students in each graduating class.
So is this data we collect?
We do collect the data, we report it to New York State, so we have to report to the state what our students' plans are. If they're going to an out-of-state four-year school, an in-state four-year school, or two-year school.
So we don't have the breakdown because that's the category New York State is asking for, and so we ask it as like a compound question.
Correct.
Okay.
So I basically know, just because of the work we do with the counselors and knowing where our students are going, that it's, you know, students are, smaller amount are going to into the military. Then we have, maybe the next category might be trade school, the next category might be employment.
So the spring meeting would tell us that, right? The final meeting that you described?
It would, So one of the quirks of Naviance is that it does an excellent job with college. One of the critiques from counselors to our school, which owns Naviance, is that it doesn't allow us, right now it looks like 87% of our students have applied to college and 13% have not. But it doesn't let us, doesn't have a category for planning on going to employment, planning on, so that's just a quirk of the system. But that's how we would.
Okay, I have so many questions, we could do this for another hour. So I'm just gonna limit myself to this other one since I interrupted so many. You mentioned summer melt. What do we do about that to prevent that?
Those senior exit meetings would have something to do with it. I think the additional meetings that we're having, I know that our counselors who work with our English language learners and our first gen students are, have more than just one of those meetings. They have lots of meetings with the students to ensure that they are prepared. Our social worker who works with the College Pioneers is also working with those students. So we do the best that we can up until graduation to ensure, unfortunately, you know, those 8-9 weeks before they head off to college, the students are on their own with their families, and there could be other factors that impact that. I can't say that I see that as a big issue here at Schreiber, but it is an issue that the US Department of Education pays attention to.
Oh, so we don't have data on whether that is occurring here?
No, we do not.
I think we need to make sure that that's not happening here, and if it is, we should be doing something about it. That's tragic to me, if there was a plan and then it doesn't happen. So we need to look at that. Okay, we're very, very late, and there is a large community among us today with interest in this subject. So go ahead.
Hi, I have a few questions. Just my first one, which is yes or no. Is our school profile publicly available or available upon request?
It's on the school website.
It is, okay, great. Just from, so last year, there was if I recall, there was a guidance counselor that was dedicated specifically to supporting the students that were going to college. It's my understanding that that position no longer exists this year, but as we're going into budget season, I guess the question, you know, for this committee is that something that would be beneficial and something that you feel is needed to, you know, make any improvements that you would be considering as far as the college application process goes in supporting students?
The position was a great position. It was funded out of the COVID funds. And when, given the budget constraints we had last year, we were not able to continue funding that. I think we're in budget discussions as we speak as a district. You know, whether that is something we'd like to bring back in some sort of a plan to restructure, rethink guidance, that's a possibility. We don't have that in place right now, but you know, we did like what that counselor in that position was able to do.
Okay,
And then
I'm
my
so
last-
sorry. Well, we're not gonna do multiple questions in case. I can come back to you.
One to the end.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Better one for the end, she said.
Save the best for last.
Okay.
It's not a question, it's just a comment really quick. I would just want to say that to your goal of getting parents more informed of the process, as someone with a senior this year, I think my biggest takeaway from the presentation is that starting, like when I look at the timeline and starting junior year with like the college night in December of junior year felt way, way too late. And I would really consider pushing that timeline up. You know, there are a lot of students, including myself admittedly, that, you know, met with private college counselors, and the timeline that they're suggesting is way earlier than this. Like, you should be able to use the summer before junior year to really set yourself up for success in junior year and hit the ground running, whether it's visiting schools, whether it's, you know, thinking about various community service projects that you could be doing. And this timeline really condenses the whole process, and it makes junior year, I think, a little bit more stressful than it needs to be. So I would really consider pushing that up. Thank you so much.
My line of sight missed you with
Please do not.
Ms. Director here, so I so apologize. I
Do
should
not
have gone
apologize.
straight to a board member.
I'll just never let you ask
Sandra.
questions. No, I'm just
So,
joking.
so sorry.
I have just very quick comments, and again, it could be for administration, curriculum committee as a whole, potentially for future presentations. But for me, maybe because this specific presentation said college admissions is why it wasn't more detailed. But for one of the things that I noted for a future presentation, maybe this is a two-part presentation if the curriculum committee is interested, but that 12% that is not of the 4-year, 2-year, I can't ask any questions on it because I didn't see any data on it. So possibly a more in-depth presentation on what that looks like and what data we have to show the board on kind of what those outcomes are, which part 2 of that would be retention data. I know it was like alluded to, and I feel like it was discussed potentially last year, but some sort of data on showing the board and really so we understand, not just for that 12%, but even these students of graduation of those 4-year, 2-year pathways, but it's all anecdotal. Like all we hear is like these discussions, but it's hard for me to understand without seeing any data on it, if there's available data. So that would just be soft recommendations, requests, help me to understand more as a trustee. New York State, you said, changed the requirements on the FAFSA application now being noted as how many are applying. I think it would be really helpful for me as a trustee, and if the committee agrees, potentially that we see that data to understand if it's a new requirement in New York State, why don't we see that data part of this presentation of how many students are applying for FAFSA. Slide 3 said the college and career readiness for 1 year. I feel like for future presentations that it would be more informative if we saw year-over-year progress for the college career readiness percentages that were shown. And then I have an actual question now. This will be the last. The trips that, slide 27 said the trip funded by the Ed Foundation to 2 colleges. Are any funded currently by this year or last year by the district?
No, so the trips are, the buses are probably the most expensive piece. They're thousands of dollars, and I think we have 1 bus this year. So no, we typically need support for.
So traditionally, it's always been an outside grant to fund those visits.
Yeah, this is the second year that we're doing that, and
Okay,
Yes.
and then at the moment, it said it, I think, that it's only restricted to ELL students. So there's not been a wider base outside of ELL
we've
students.
focused on our English language learners, and that does include first-gen students, because we have, again, some of those college pioneers that sort of rose up, that are now in sophomore, junior year that are attending. So if they're, to get to that 30, we really wanted to prioritize students who would benefit from this trip, and students that would not have the access or the means to attend a college trip like this with their families.
The only reason I ask is grouping ELL as a means isn't necessarily data-based in my own mind. So this is my own opinion, versus maybe socioeconomic of the students on the free and reduced potentially, who then, even for me, and when I said wider base, I meant even that group right above it, right? So we have this whole middle group of our student population who potentially, it's restricted, like being able to fly out of New York and within New York even is restricted, not just for that smaller subgroup. But if the district is not funding it, that's not a district question, that's a whoever's writing the grant question.
So I hadn't, that's one of the ones I took off my list, but now that you introduced
I threw
it.
it back.
No, it's an important question because not only the piece of it being a socioeconomic question, but what I wanted to understand was there a reason we didn't do it at a more local level? Because this was Staten Island, so would we not be capturing a greater population of Port Washington students if it was a local visit?
So the selection of schools, last year we visited SUNY Purchase and Mercy University, and these were purposely selected because we liked College of Staten Island. First of all, it's a public school, it has dorms, and it's accessible to many students just academically. They have a lot of support programs for some of our students who are lower socioeconomic and some of our English language learners. So the counselors had come together and decided that these would be good options, and then picking Wagner College as a 4-year private school, having that option as well, plus it's a lovely campus, beautiful views, and so to kind of give them a taste of what it's like to be in a 4-year public school and a 4-year private school. We try to give students the option. We like to take them places that are just a little bit away. We're not going to have students commute to, let's say, Purchase or Wagner if they decided to go there, or Mercy. We had talked about, I think last year we were able to also take them to Queensboro. This year we just had the one trip. But our kids, we wanted to just give them a little something that was just far enough away that maybe they would not go to without some support from the school. And the conversations about who is attending the trips, the counselors we do have 2 dedicated to our English language learners, but we also they consult with one another. Do you have any students that would benefit from being on this trip? And that's where, so yes, we're calling it ELL, but there are, to get to that 30, to that cap, we're making sure that we're filling that with other students as well.
I promise, last question, and it's possibly you don't even, I highly doubt anyone within this room would know the answer off the top of the head. It's the first I noticed that school counselors are sent to visit college campuses to better understand that campus. What is the budget implication? What's the budget allocation for that?
So 2 years ago, I had requested a certain dollar amount for additional trips. I think at the time I had asked for an additional $4,000, which, each trip, it depends on whether the counselor this year who's going to visit a few schools in Pennsylvania, so it's a road trip. Then we have counselors that are maybe flying to South Carolina, so it's different financial implication. What we try to do is get on some of these trips, not all of them, but some of the trips can be funded by the institution themselves. Depends if they're doing a counselor fly-in and the counselor gets selected.
Okay.
So it all comes out of the guidance
So,
budget.
we have so many more community members, I'm so sorry.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. I look forward to it every year and seeing it's like the places you'll go and seeing where all of our graduates are going in the world. So thank you. Just to give some context, Ms. Feingold made a comment about the secondary counselor position that was reduced, or that, went away. We know there are lots of variables. We know there's a lot out of our control, but there is one thing that's not fungible and is within our control, and that's time. And if you look at the 10 districts on the North Shore, I looked at 10, including Port. All of this information is publicly available. Nobody has to trust me for it. But the average student to counselor ratio around the North Shore, excluding Port, is about 167 students to 1 counselor. In Port, that ratio is 201 students to 1 counselor, which means our counselors don't have the same amount of time that counselors in neighboring districts on the North Shore, our peer districts, those who we are comparing ourselves to for better or for worse, their counselors have more time, they have more capacity. So my question for the board is capacity a priority? What are the goals we are setting in this space, recognizing that every counselor, 3/4 of their caseload is not in the throes of college admission. This is not their only job. So what can our board do to help create capacity? Is it prioritizing this in a different way in the budget? Is it headcount? Is it extra administrative support, clerical support for our counselors to reduce the amount of time they're spending on administrative tasks, which is a lot in the college admissions process, to give them more time to actually focus on our kids, to build the relationships they need, starting when they're 14 years old, coming in as freshmen. Is it about building community partnerships to support kids in a cost-effective way so that we're not extending our budget to build this capacity? I think those are the things that I would love for this board, for this committee, for the board at large, and for the administration to consider. So thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
I had a basic question. I was reading through these takeaways, and I appreciate all the data that was presented. Are there solutions to a lot of these uncertainties or, these questions about colleges continue to lack transparency about their needs and therefore we will do X, Y, Z? A lot of these are just comments about how we're not prepared or our kids are not prepared. I'd love to see just solutions, our kids are getting rejected from top tier schools and therefore we will do X, Y, Z. It's more of just a comment, I guess, versus the question.
So unfortunately, there's really very little that we can do except to inform the students, and we do. We speak to the students when they are choosing to jump into that very selective pool that, okay, we support you, we applaud you. Let's make sure, A, you have a balanced list of schools so that you have other options that you will maybe aren't 5% acceptance rates. Let's look at some others. And we need to teach them and have real conversations with them about how do you handle rejection? How do you handle being deferred? You know that it's a very likely possibility. And to be honest, what we see, our kids are okay. They're handling it. The conversations with the parents sometimes are a little bit different. I think that there's a general sense that, and I get it as a parent, but my child works so hard. Yes, they put in so many hours on these essays and applications and resumes and making sure that everything is pristine. But it's hard. I think it's a very challenging thing for parents, for us to understand, because they're our children. So to understand that, and it may be the first time that our child has experienced real rejection, how are we going to handle that? And I think those are some of the real conversations that, and some parents are open to those conversations, and some parents are not. So, and again, that goes back to the relationship that we have. So there's very little we can do to control some of these other than to inform of those possibilities, and that's what's happening in those conversations with the parents during the junior conferences and even earlier. So,
Dr. Feeney?
I think to your point, and I think your question as well, and the reason why we started giving this presentation a few years ago is to get this information out to the public. I think a lot of parents, rightly or wrongly, think there are 3 to 4 colleges out there: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, maybe Stanford for a lot of it. Dartmouth, right? So, and I think everything Ms. Director was saying really targeted towards those extremely highly selective. We are only going to accept 5% of the applicants, and we get tens of thousands of applicants. And in those cases, and I've had conversations with the director of admissions at Harvard, and he's like, oh yeah, 95% of the kids who apply to our school are admissible and would do very well, right? They're admissible, they could be very successful at Harvard, but we're only accepting 4% of them. So putting those schools aside, and that's where, we want to prepare them for, hey, you're going to put yourself out there, just recognize the chances are you don't get it, no matter how wonderful. You could have perfect scores, you could be a Regeneron scholar, you could still get rejected, and we don't always know why, right? So that's for those. There are, however, a whole bunch of other schools that would be really wonderful schools for some of our kids, even those high-achieving ones that would love to go in those Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, whatever schools. And there are things we can do for that, and that's part of the reason why we have the college visits. That's one of the reasons why we looked at our class profile and asked, is this shining the best light on our Schreiber students? So those are things, bringing those schools into the college fair and having presentations like this to make parents more aware of what the field is. So I don't want you to come away with the impression that, well, tough luck. You know, we keep our eye on this, but for a lot of our parents, rightly or wrongly, we just have to maybe disabuse them of the notion that the only schools that matter are those ones with those fancy names. What we are really focused on is finding the right school for that child and for that family. And for some cases, it might be that school that maybe doesn't have the same level of name recognition, but will give you a scholarship that covers 80% of your tuition. That might be the right school for that family. So those sort of discussions are things we can have and really help parents recognize there's a lot going on in the process. So no, it's not hands up, tough luck, oh well, you're gonna get rejected, good luck. It is, these schools recognize the challenge, but hey, we're doing a lot of work with these other schools and make sure you're positioned for that. I don't know if that helps a little bit.
And the book circles that we had done?
Yeah, the book circles we had that talks about the process, you know, where you go is not who you'll be, the Frank Bruni book.
And Who Gets In and Why was the other
Who
one.
Gets In Why was a
So
great
Who
one.
Gets In and Why is another great book if you haven't read it yet, that really talks
Jeff
about the,
Selingo. Yeah.
yes, and talks about the admissions process and how it could vary from school to school. And when you're looking at different ways that they're trying to fill a freshman class and really round out and balance a freshman class, it doesn't mean that everyone has an equal shot all of the time. So it really helps to illuminate for our students and our families, all students and families, that it's not just about if I check all of these boxes, then I'm in, I'm good. And it takes some of the ownership off of the students. We want every child to do their best and get into a school where they will be successful. And if they don't get into their number one school, we're trying to take away that shame and that disappointment, because there is another place where they can really go and be successful. And sometimes that decision is well out of their control. So we try to prepare our students the best that we can, maximize their potential the best that we can, and then show them that there are different avenues to be successful, even if number one choice doesn't work out.
I think it's really important to note that when you talk about it that way, that's not, like, even though I asked the question on maximizing, like, that's not giving up, right, on getting kids into the best schools, because the landscape is very different than it was when all the parents who went to college applied to college, where you could kind of guess where you were going to get in, and the programs also looked very different too. So my understanding, and I haven't gone through this process as a parent yet, but my understanding is, like, there are a lot of schools where you can get a fantastic education at this point, and it's not really even about the top 10 or the top 20 in terms of the quality of your education. And also there are a lot of schools where it's a great school for X,
Yes.
right? Or it's a great school for Y. There's a lot more specialization amongst a liberal arts kind of curriculum, which did not used to be the case when parents of this generation were applying to college. So there's a lot more nuance in understanding what you want to be aiming for and why something would be a good fit for you. And I happen to agree with you that I think, like, there are many places, any individual student, there are many places that student could be happy, not one perfect place that if they fall short of, they failed and their life is over.
This is just the beginning, it's not the end.
That was gonna be another one of my questions, was the conversation about the elite schools, and then all the rest. But more of there are particular programs that if our counselors are understanding what a child's passion is, then it's, oh my goodness, go for these 5, right? That don't make the elite list, but, you know, they're incredibly special for X. So I'm speaking about architecture as my own personal experience, Syracuse. So, right, so there are,
That's embarrassing.
that needs to be an incredible part of the conversation and the importance of that.
Hello. Hello. So my oldest is a 9th grader, so I'm sort of new in this. And it would be really helpful for me as a parent to know, to sort of have it broken down to 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, the steps, like what's on the student, what's on the parent, what's on the guidance counselor. So for example, it sounds like there's a lot of great focus on choosing the right school and directing the kids in that way. And we've already had somebody talk about independent guidance, pulling somebody in for a counselor outside of the school. And I actually don't know, I realized, what the role of the guidance in school is in terms of the applications themselves. So do you help them craft the essays, look at the application, the supplemental essays, or is that all on just the student parents? So if there was some kind of rubric where it was very clear, then I could also, I mean, I've already watched 20 webinars, this past January, and I found out, oh, we didn't take the PSAT yet, so we just got cut out of a bunch of scholarship opportunities. I didn't even know we were supposed to take the PSAT yet. So,
For your ninth grader?
No. I'm a word of caution, and I won't say too much. And I'm always available. If you hear something, let me know, because ninth graders do not need to take PSAT. In fact, we discourage that in a lot of ways.
so that rubric, if I knew when I needed to sign up for the PSAT, when they would take it, where, how, because then when I started looking into that and realized, oh, we only have, twice a year, it has to be at this school, or do I have to take them to another school? Do I have to take the day off of work, that kind of thing?
So that's where so having a conversation with your counselor, we do post the college process book for each year on the website, and it lists all those different things.
So that there's a rubric on the website?
There is a timeline, so the timeline is there. When we share information about PSAT, we say it's for sophomores and juniors, but it's not every sophomore, it's only for that sophomore who feels they're ready to take it. It's really at that point just a practice, it's not a necessity. If your child is really there and ready and wants to do it, great. If they're not even thinking about that, there's no need to take it until junior year.
And
But
the
even if they
application,
want to take that in their sophomore year, they're still not getting scholarships until they take it their junior year.
And no student is locked out from the National Merit Scholarship, because if they miss the PSAT, let's say they're sick that day, there are other ways, and that's where you could have a conversation. You could submit an SAT score and be in consideration.
Well,
There's a
that's
certain
great to
time, yes, they're not going to make, eliminate that possibility for any student. We hear all the time, there are things, we're not always aligned with what we hear coming from some of the private counselors. So always being, lots of people use private counselors, and that's wonderful. But if you hear something, have a conversation with your counselor, and we can, sort of decipher. I've heard some things that are absolutely spot on, I've heard some things that I've had to clarify, so
I
it really
think the
depends.
important takeaway, though, is that that information is not getting out to the community. It's a structural question.
Right.
Not specific to Merit Scholar, not specific to PSAT. It's more, how do we make sure that our entire community understands the process and the responsibilities and the timeline?
So each month there's a newsletter okay, so and then that information is in there so PSAT was in there for September, let's say, and that information.
Well,
But,
right?
yes,
So let's not get into the weeds. That was a structured question, right?
sure.
Well, I had actually a similar question, because my daughter is a ninth grader, but I think you covered most of it, but very simple question from your presentation, what are neighboring schools? You mentioned about.
I can't disclose which one, is that what you're asking me, which school is it?
Yeah, I mean, you
Why?
mentioned like neighboring schools in your
Yeah.
presentation, so I wanna know what those schools are.
We used one particular school district that was willing to disclose the data on the basis that it would remain confidential. So I can't tell you which district, but it's a local district.
Can I just grab Ms. McMaster's comment on the rubric, because I think the important part to note about this too is like the timeline on our website, if I'm not mistaken, is like juniors and seniors by month. And she's suggesting, and I think it's a great idea, like a document, and I think this ties into what Ms. Feingold said too, like a document that says, okay, your kid's in college, like, or is gonna be applying to college, like what should you be thinking about at each point? And I think you've noted things in this presentation that should be happening in ninth grade, that it would be good for families to know. Like, you should be having a conversation in this first meeting with your guidance counselor that involves like making sure that they understand things about you, about your family, about what you're thinking, you're gonna be doing this career interest form. This is going to inform what you're doing later because we're already starting to think about it. We should be thinking about it when we pick our courses, things like that, so that these things aren't accidentally missed because they always can be. And also because there are some families who are going to be thinking about it. Maybe they have an older child who went through it recently, and then there are some that won't be at all and then are kind of shocked by it.
Right.
Or even are shocked by it if they thought they were an educator person because things have changed.
Yes, yes. And I see that as being something that, while I know is happening in personal conversations between counselor and family, I could see that having something like that would be very helpful.
Okay, oh my goodness, hello.
It's just a data clarification question, of course, I have the data question. On the application numbers for all of the different years, how do you account for withdrawals? Like if you have is this after everything is finished?
Great
or
question.
is it?
And yes, so
You
I
take the
factor
withdrawals?
that in.
Okay,
So when you see that number up there, total number of applications to
right,
Northeastern, I have already factored that out.
okay, all right, thank you.
You got it.
So sorry we took long. Oh, hello, go ahead.
Just one last super fast.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. This was a great presentation. It's very informative. I also look forward to it each year. And just as a senior parent, we had our conference already, and I felt the counselor was very prepared, sort of knew who my kid was, gave us suggestions that we hadn't thought of, mentioned programs that we didn't even know existed. So I just wanted to just end with that little anecdote and just thank you very much for everything.
Thank you, Lori.
Wonderful, thank you
Yes,
so much.
as always, the
Yeah.
million detailed questions are the result of like a lot of hard work and doing a good job.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks we can therefore do better because we've shown so much prowess.
Thank you for everyone's time, especially our administrators. And we look forward to next month, which is going to be on March 11th at 1 p.m. 1 p.m., March 11th. We are
It's a
discussing the
Tuesday, yeah.
senior experience.
The surprise one.
We're looking forward to that. So please join us then and have a wonderful break.